Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 in this series. In the previous 2 installments we looked at the nature of things, their necessary relationship to what they are not, and the nature of the boundaries we perceive, which are the body of differentiation and thingness, or existence. We asked if such boundaries are real in themselves or appearances arising within consciousness. Now, it's one thing to ponder such questions with respect to the objects around us, but quite another to turn these questions inwards and see what they mean with regard to our own existence. We humans have an interesting and long-established habit of doing this, isolating ourselves from our deliberations on the nature of existence. It's a habit we really ought to break. If things have no true or inherent beginning or end, if boundaries are simply appearances that arise within consciousness, that is, if all things lack inherent existence, what does that say about us? Don't all these points apply equally to our own existence and nature? Think about any aspect at all of yourself. Can it exist of itself? Where does it begin and end? Does it not require that which is not it to give it identity? Can we not break every aspect of our own self down into the same relative components as the tapestry of phenomena we perceive all around us? Is there really an us that is at the core of all these appearances, the thing doing the perceiving? If we imagine so, as humanity has done in the development of every form of soul concept, how is it that this soul, this core self, possesses the ability to not be subject to the nature and limits of every other phenomenon? Short of absurd and wishful supernatural imaginings, I don't see how it can. So, just as we may conclude that all things that appear to us lack inherent existence and possess no true beginning or end, and are simply appearances wholly dependent on where boundaries arise, so then can we say this about ourselves. Just like clouds and swirling creek eddies, we are simply appearances whipped up by the whims of causality, or if you like, nature. This prevailing and indeed quintessentially human notion we have of an inherently existent self is what in most spiritual and philosophical traditions is known as the ego, or the prevailing I. Feel free to insert your own term at this point. It is, of course, upon analysis, a false concept, a delusion. It's an exceedingly powerful delusion, to be sure, one developed by millions of years of cognitive evolution, but a delusion nonetheless. Let's not forget that evolution doesn't care for what is true, or for what is sane, and only for what replicates and survives, and possibly causes creationists to fear for their souls. This particular delusion, that of the existence of an inherent self, or a soul, or a definitive source of consciousness, whilst no doubt having been of benefit to us in our evolutionary past, is also the source of all suffering, all angst, false emotions and forms of madness like religion. It also has the potential to be the cause of our ultimate demise. Now, its manifold ills are beyond the scope of this presentation, but let me just say on that subject that not much good can come from delusional mind states. As one author put it, self-existence can be visualized as volcanic islands projecting above the sea. Underneath, they all slope into the substrata in which they are one, and that sea is our deluded thought. In that metaphor, each island is a person believing in their inherent or separate existence. We egotists don't perceive the substrata of our own reality. The sea is our collective mental activity which spews forth as a result of this belief state. That sea is the mental world in which we humans live, and upon which society is built. Quite literally, a sea of delusion-based ideas. Now, it's quite possible that at this point you may be wanting to ask, what does all this mean for consciousness? Must concepts not emanate from a conceiver? Well, just as we can't find any origin or base source for anything, including ourselves, neither can we find one for this consciousness we believe to be arising from a conceiver. Modern physicalist notions of consciousness as an emergent property of certain physical states can't really aid us here because they don't really address the matter. Those physical states are subject to the same lack of inherency as anything else. Now, previously I've spoken of things and boundaries as being appearances that arise within consciousness. And as useful as this form of thinking can be, we ultimately have to take a step beyond it. If there is no inherent self or source from which consciousness arises and produces boundaries, we can't really think of consciousness as arising at all. Where or what is the origin of consciousness? What is the origin of the origin? We're not really conscious of things, but rather consciousness is itself made up of things, and is nothing other than differentiated thingness. Consciousness is its content, not a something or other that perceives content. Anything perceived or conceived, any imagined source or origin, is merely another piece of content in the differentiated tapestry of appearances that is consciousness. Of course, for practical purposes, we work within the illusion of these origins and the illusion of a self. But where we fall down and lapse into delusion is when we believe them to be inherently real. Now, all of this seems rather counterintuitive. Why is this sort of thinking so counterintuitive? Why do we so naturally tend to think in terms of sources and causes and origins? Well, it's simply because evolution has produced that dynamic in us. It's more or less how we're programmed. It's natural for a dualistic mind to think dualistically, and therefore seek causes for every effect, effects for every cause. It's also natural for us to think of this dynamic in a somewhat linear way, and look for a basis for any given thing. Processes that lead us to forms of infinite regress are very difficult for the mind, and indeed the ego, to embrace. They're contrary to its natural predilections. Nevertheless, it's possible for us to think outside the box, to think and reason counterintuitively. When we do so, we discover that it's the very nature of things, the nature of existence itself, that precludes the possibility of origins or sources for anything, including ourselves and consciousness. That's it for this series on the nature of existence. Thanks for being with us here at Men of the Infinite, your dedicated wisdom channel. Till next time, it's bye for now, and remember that truth is valuable.